On today's show, we look ahead and try to predict the top 10 defenses in the NBA next season. Will Boston repeat as number one? What offseason moves will have the biggest impact? And will there be any surprises? All of that and more coming up next on today's Locked On NBA.
You are Locked On NBA, your daily NBA podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to a Friday Locked On NBA, your daily podcast on the NBA. However you may be tuning in on YouTube, Odyssey, or your favorite podcast app, thank you so much for making Locked On NBA your first listen every day. I'm Wes Goldberg here with Adam Mares, and last week, Adam, you and I did the hopeless exercise of trying to predict the top 10 offenses in the NBA for next season. So this week, I thought we could do something even more hopeless and difficult, and that's to try to predict the top 10 defenses in the league next season. Now, if you're wondering, as a listener, why this is more hopeless, let me just point out that the Cavaliers and the Mavericks, who were who were in the top 7 in defensive rating last season, just who would have thought that was going to happen? So I think maybe even the most irrational fans of those teams would not have expected that. So this is hard. I actually did go back and track what the last basically 3 years of top 10 defensive ratings are. The easy part is figuring out the teams that's part of their identity is defense, and those teams tend to repeat. But there's always
and if they had continuity, brought the same guys back.
Right. So we'll get into that. We'll also get into some of the teams that we expect to drop out of the top 10 later in the show. But I've got my list 1 through 10. You have yours. We have not seen each other's lists, so we'll start at 1, then go through the rest of what we think the best 10 teams in the league will be in defensive rating next season. So let's start at the top. No curveballs here. I'm going with Boston. They finished number 1 last year by a pretty sizable, healthy margin. They have not gotten worse. You could argue maybe they've even gotten better with the addition of Malcolm Brogdon, but I won't even go that far. I don't think they've gotten worse. And internal, they're young. They've got a bunch of two-way wings. They're really good. I have no reason to move them down.
And they made it look pretty easy. I mean, part of this is what they did. I mean, there's a couple teams maybe later on the list will say, are they going to be able to repeat that? Are they going to be able to sustain that? Well, Boston, they did it so effortlessly. They did it at the highest levels. They did it against the best teams. I'd be shocked if they weren't top 3 defensively, and my money is with you. I think they're going to be the number 1 defense next season.
Yeah, so like I said, no surprises to start. I don't know if this qualifies as a surprise. My number 2 defense. I'm going to go with Philadelphia.
Why? Of course they were 12th last season. Of course that qualifies as a surprise.
Okay, well, good. Then we do have surprises. Well, they were second in the NBA in defensive rating in the year before last year. Right. They were in the top 10 in 2019, 2020. This is a team that is good defensively, but there was some interesting shakeups last year with that roster, namely trading a bunch of players and picks and stuff for James Harden. Right. But you add PJ Tucker, DeAnthony Melton, Daniel House. You've got Joel Embiid plugging in the middle. From all the reports around James Harden, it sounds like he's going to be at least as good, if not better, than he was last year when he was at his best. But I don't even care. Yeah. You know, they still have Thibault. They still have a bunch of guys. Yeah. There's enough good defenders there. And Joel Embiid is just – I know we always focus on the scoring with him. He is such a great defender. I mean, he really is. I've got Philly at number 2.
They didn't make my top 10.
Oh, wow.
And I was with you in this one way. I couldn't decide whether they were going to miss out on the top 10 or be like 5th. I mean, this is kind of a bet. Like, they have a lot of upside, obviously. Yeah. You have Joel Embiid. You mentioned 2 years ago, you know, Ben Simmons is an elite defender. He's probably a top 10 defender in the NBA. So I don't know that it's totally noise going from such a high rating to falling outside of the top 10 last year like they did. Then you ask, James Harden, not a great defender, not a guy that usually is giving full effort defensively in November, December, January. They do get PJ Tucker. I do think that helps. And I do think that they're going to be a team that simplifies things. I think they're going to slow it down. I think this team is going to remind you a little bit of the Houston Rockets, where it becomes more of a half-court game, and we know that helps your defense if you're slowing the game down, preventing fast breaks. So they have a case to be made. They also get DeAnthony Melton, who can guard. I don't know. I still think this is going to be largely a team that carries on the identity of their top players, Joel Embiid and James Harden, both of whom I think this season are going to be more focused on the offensive end than the defensive end.
I think that's a good point. It kind of is a high variance thing with them. If they decide that if Doc Rivers can get that group to be defensively oriented, I think this is probably, I think they could be the best defense in the league. Or maybe not the best, because Harden is an issue there. But This is probably their ceiling. But yeah, they could just not be in the top 10. Just say, you know what, we're just James Harden, Joel Embiid, you guys go score 30 a night, and that's how we're going to win games in the regular season.
And by the way, that's another variable, not just the Ben Simmons piece, but also you get a different coach and your defensive rating drops. We see this a lot. Sometimes it is a little bit about the leadership on that team. And that's why I say going to Doc Rivers, going to James Harden as a part of that, I don't know if it's going to be top 10.
How do you want to tell me your number 2, or do you want me to keep going on my list? Because you didn't have Philly in your top 10.
Keep going. I'm sure my number 3 is going to, or your number 3 will be my number 2.
I've got Memphis.
Oh, wow. No, we do differ here a little bit.
I don't really know why I have Memphis. This is why I feel really good about my 10, but I don't feel good at all about the order. But I'm putting Memphis here. They were 7th 2 years ago. They were 6th last year. They continue to climb in defensive rating. They're young. They try hard. I think they're going to be really motivated after the way the playoffs ended to just kind of come out guns blazing in the regular season, because I think they know they need to have a really high seed if they have any chance in getting to the Western Conference Finals or even further than that. They're young. They play hard. They're really well coached. I think defense is really important to them. I've got them here at number 3.
I'm guessing the part of the calculus was they're young and they're good defensively. They'll rise defensively.
Yes.
They're going to be without Jaren Jackson Jr. early on, and I think that's going to really hurt them. You lose Kyle Anderson, who I think, a very good connector piece for them on both ends of the court, and then you have DeAnthony Melton obviously out of there. So, and then on top of that, I think the broader thing is they're the young team that got over the hump. They're no longer sneaking up on anybody. Everybody kind of sees them going. I think in all facets, I think we did this with the offensive end with them as well. I think in all facets, they take a little bit of a step back. Is it a major one? No, they're on my list, but I don't think they're going to be rising the way that you do.
We'll see. All right, we'll keep going on my list then. I've got the Clippers at number 4. This is the team that I really debated whether or not I wanted to go even higher with them. They could easily be, I think, the best. I think they could be the best defense in the league this year with the way. Look, you've got Kawhi, you've got Paul George. As long as they're healthy, they're going to have a chance to be the best defense in the league. The John Wall piece of it, we'll see how that really works out. They still have Reggie Jackson there, who's okay. And then they have Zubac in the middle. And in the West, I mean, who are the centers you're really worried about? It's Jokic, and it's sort of end of list, right? And so, most nights they're going to be just fine with just Zubac in the middle. And Zubac, by the way, is a good defensive center. That's not to poo-poo him. They just have no depth behind him. And so, and then they can shift to a smaller kind of switch everything style. They brought back Batum. They have a bunch of guys. They obviously have Robert Covington and Norman Powell and good wing defenders there. The more I'm talking through this, I'm wondering where you had them on your list. I'm wondering if I have them too low at number 4.
I had him number 3. So, I mean, we're right in that same ballpark. You kind of have to go back to the bubble year 2019-20, which, by the way, wasn't all a bubble year. I mean, it was mostly not a bubble year. And they were 5th defensively, and their peaks on defense were extremely high. I mean, we saw them really lock up some teams. That was even a year where they had guys in and out of the lineup, and yet they still were 5th. You bring in Kawhi Leonard and Paul George, you get those guys back to somewhat close to fully healthy, if not totally fully healthy. And you also have so many different bodies that you can throw out there. So for me, they almost be for picks. I don't know if they're going to be like exactly what number they're going to be, but I would be shocked if there was even relative health, just the average outcome of health for this team if they were in a top 10 defense.
They were 8th last year without Kawhi Leonard, and for Paul George for a nice portion of the season. They were 8th the year before that, I believe, the year after the bubble year. Yeah, they were 8th the last 2 years. We talked about Doc Rivers. Could he get Philadelphia to buy in as a defensive-oriented team? Tyler's done that with the Clippers. They are a defensive-first team. So they're 8th last year. Again, Paul George for a nice chunk of the season. They're going to have him back, assuming, for 60-plus games. Kawhi Leonard, same thing for him. Now, Kawhi isn't the defensive player of the year guy he was in San Antonio, but he's still really, really good on the defensive end. So I think all this, that's probably their floor, I think, is number 4. Maybe I'll switch them. I'm going to switch them. I'm going to officially switch them in the Grizzlies. So you and I now have the same number 3.
All right, there you go.
All right, we're going to continue. What?
I had the Grizzlies 6th, by the way, so I didn't have them that much further, but just a little bit further than you.
See, you're poo-pooing my Memphis, and you ended up having on 6 anyway. All right, we'll continue along with our defensive rating rankings next here on Locked On NBA. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline.net is the fastest and easiest way to check in on all of your betting needs. Find all of your favorite sports and events at the #1 online source for odds, lines, and games. Find reviews and news of every league, including Major League Baseball, NFL, NBA, NHL, combat sports, esports, and even golf. BetOnline continues to be the top online resource for all of your sport wagering information, from live in-game betting, scores, and podcasts. They have you covered. Let's see here. They have new NBA rookie prop bets, and they've got Chet Holmgren at an average of 2 blocks a game for this season, for Chet Holmgren's rookie season. And I went back and I looked. The last few rookies who averaged 2+ blocks in a season: Mitchell Robinson in 2018, 2019, Joel Embiid in 16, 17, Pau Gasol in 2001, 2002. So only 3 rookies have ever averaged 2 blocks a game since 2000. That's not a lot, but 2 of them were relatively recently. But I watched Chet Holmgren in summer league. I don't know, man. The shot blocking skills are there. I think he could do it. I think he'll average. He averaged 2 blocks a game in summer league, but I think he could do it in the NBA in the regular season. So I'd put some money on that. Head to BetOnline today or use your mobile device to learn more about the action happening today. BetOnline, where the game starts. Back here at Locked On NBA, breaking down the top 10 defenses, what we think will be the top 10 defenses in the league next season by defensive rating. All right, just to recap here, I had Boston and you had Boston, but we both had them as our number 1 in defensive rating. I had Memphis at number 3. You had them all. You have them all the way at 6. I had Philly at 2. You did not have them in your top 10. We both had the Clippers. And now my number 5 defense, I'm going to go with the Phoenix Suns. And I really don't even feel great about it, but I really don't know. There's just so many good defenders on that team. Mikal Bridges, Cam Johnson, Chris Paul, obviously, gets the house in order. DeAndre Ayton's back. Devin Booker has gotten better at that end. The reason I don't feel good about it is just the icky feeling at the end of last year. And they went like guns blazing, balls to the wall last season, 63 wins. Let's go for it. This is our chance to win the title. And you've talked about this in regards to defensive rating and offensive rating. What's the intensity level? How does this team approach the regular season? Are they going to more coast and just sort of hold serve until the playoffs come around?
Right.
Or are they really going to go for it? And with Phoenix, I feel like I would just be surprised if they have that energy, that intensity to really go for it the way they did last regular season. I actually think they'll buy their time a little bit. That said, I still have them as one of the top 5 defenses in the league next season because I just can't find a way to make them go lower than this.
I'm surprised because this one feels like one of the safe picks to me. I just feel like their defensive floor is pretty high. We know who they are. Your point about, are they going to have their foot on the gas pedal all season the way they did the last 2? Absolutely not. I think that's the big part of this is they're probably going to take a little bit more games off, quarters off, halves off, possessions off than they did over the last 2 seasons. It's just natural when you've pushed that hard and it didn't work out to say, okay, maybe it's more about peaking at the right time. And this might be a team that approaches this upcoming season that way. That being said, they're a really good defensive team. I think their demise, DeAndre Ayton, he's unhappy. They didn't offer him the contract. I think those things are going to be, when the dust settles, those things will have all been a little bit overstated. Now, are they over the hump of what their absolute apex is? Maybe. I think probably just a little bit. Last year was probably their best shot at this. But I don't think that the door is closed on them by any means. And a large part of that is because they have so many great defenders at just about every spot on the court.
Yeah, they were 3rd in defensive rating last year. So I just have them sliding down to 5th, just taking the foot off the gas a little bit. Where did you have them?
I think I had them in the same spot. I had them 4th. So I had them again. It feels like I'm having them slide, but really it's just the Clippers getting healthy.
Yeah. All right, number 6, I have Toronto. I have Toronto. This is, to me, sort of just it's coaching, it's personnel, it's the fact that even last year as a young team, they were 9th they were 9th in defensive rating. They have a bunch of young guys, Scotty Barnes, all these guys that are just going to continue to get better. They have Nick Nurse coaching that team. I think there's buy-in. I think there's try hard. They add a nice guy in Otto Porter, who's a nice versatile defender for them too. So I think all of this stuff just adds to their lift in defensive rating. And so much of the stuff is just trying hard and good coaching. And you look at the way Cleveland sort of took the league by storm, might be an overstatement, but they ended up 5th in defensive rating last year, in part because they were so different. And it was just in the course of regular season, it's just a curveball that's thrown to you in a league that mostly throws fastballs. I think Toronto is a little bit of the same thing. Obviously, everybody wants to be long and wants to switch everything, but Toronto is very long and does switch everything. And I think they're unique in that way, in that versatility. And so I think it'll be a curveball during the parts of the regular season. and I think they're just going to be really, really good defensively.
I mean, I completely agree with you. To me, they're like Miami and Boston, and that they're these teams that just kind of always are good defensively. They have the personnel and the identity and the scheme and the coaching and all of those things that you're going to be a pretty good defense. And then I think there is a little bit. I had them right around that same spot. I think I have them 7th, and I do think there's a chance that they maybe even climb above that. If you look at the post All-Star break portion of the season last year, I believe they were 5th. You get Scotty Barnes, who's a big part of what they do defensively, sort of the free safety of their defense. And he's a year older, a year more sort of reading the defense that way. So I'm with you. I mean, it's funny. I think we have all but one of the same team so far on the list. And in more or less the same order. Like we're within 1 or 2 spots so far in all of these.
So I still don't know who your number 2 is.
It's wild to me that you don't. I'm kind of surprised.
I think I know who it is, and I think it's my next team.
All right.
You know, I don't even feel good about. I don't know. I'm going to say it. I've got the Warriors at number 7.
Yeah, that was my number 2.
That's what I thought. You're a Warriors guy. Look, I'm a Warriors guy too. I just think that they lost some veterans, and I know like Dante DiVincenzo and JaMychal Green, they're there. They're mostly offensive oriented players. I don't think those guys are as good defensively as what they lost in Gary Payton and Otto Porter. But moreover, I think that this team during the regular season is going to be so focused on getting minutes and the development of those rookies, Jonathan Kuminga, Moses Moody, and James Wiseman. And the last time we saw Wiseman, he was very rough defensively. And even in Summer League, I mean, he was fouling everything that moved. And then Kuminga needs a lot of work defensively. And even Moses Moody, I think, is known as sort of this defensive guy. He's fine, but he's still just a second-year player, and there's things to work through with him too. This is not a team that I'm worried about in the playoffs at all. I think this is another team that could be right there with Boston. It's going to be them and Boston probably is the best 2 defenses in the playoffs when they start tapering off those rookie minutes and maybe or the young guy minutes and maybe even those through the development of the regular season they become better by the postseason. But in the regular season, I don't think that they're going to drop fully out of the top 10. But I think they're going to be at number 7. And I honestly, I almost feel like this is too high for them. The only reason I have them this high is because they're the Warriors, and it's Steve Kerr, and it's Draymond Green, and it's Klay Thompson, and it's Andrew Wiggins. It's that group where they just have a defensive identity, and they find a way to get it done on that end. But it's going to be rough, I think, for a little bit.
I don't. I think it's going to be great. I mean, you followed the Warriors for a long time during, as they were the greatest team over the last decade. How often did Draymond Green have his foot off the gas pedal defensively over those runs? I mean, not even defensively, just I don't know if it's in the Warriors' DNA to press the way they did in the 73-win season, but they never, in all the years that they were the top dog, they always kind of made a point to send messages throughout the season. I just don't see them having these prolonged gaps where they're not defending at a high level. They know who they are. They've got a lot of very, very good defensive players. They did lose some of their veteran presence. Some of those guys, the Otto Porters and Bielitsas, who I think are really good players. Those guys know how to execute a defensive scheme. They still got Draymond Green. You get a healthier Klay Thompson. I think they're going to run a lot of teams out of the court on the other end of the court. And I think their defense is going to be there. I had them 2. You could easily talk me down a couple spots. I mean, all of these, it's so hard. 2, 5, somewhere in there. But I think the Warriors are going to have another elite defense.
Does 7 qualify as elite? Because I kind of said all this stuff as if they were going to drop to like league average. I still have them as one of the best 7, and they could be anywhere. I do think that there's going to be a concerted effort to say, all right, we're willing to take a step back in whatever our defensive rating is for the regular season to get these rookies some minutes and let them play through some mistakes. But in the playoffs, I'm not worried about that team at all. Anyway, number 8, I've got the Milwaukee Bucks. I think we have a return into the top 10 with them.
Okay, this is the toughest one for me.
So did you have them in your top 10?
I had them 10. Or I had them 9.
I'm okay with that.
I had them 9.
Yeah, so we're in the same space right here. They're going to get Brook Lopez back.
Yep.
They didn't have him for most of last regular season. They dropped out of the top 10. But look at the years when they had him. They were 9th in 2020, 2021. They were the number 1 defense in the league in 2019, 2020. You have Brook Lopez. You have Giannis. You have Drew Holiday. You have Chris Middleton. That's a really good you have Mike Budenholzer, who cares about defense. It's just a good team. This, honestly, it could be too low for Milwaukee. I could easily see them finishing much higher.
It could be, but you also have Brook Lopez at 34 years old. And for a big man, especially a 7-footer, the last time we saw him as an elite defender was 2 seasons ago. So the gap between 32 and 34 as a 7-foot, 270-pound guy, I don't know that you're going to get that consistent 82-game elite defense from. Now, when you have Giannis, you have one elite defender on the court whenever he's there, and he's a pretty durable guy. So I don't think they'll fall too far. That's why I had him 9th. But I don't know if it's going to be – they're another team to me that probably needs to peak at the right time, especially with some of their more older veteran players like Brook Lopez. You need to kind of peak going into the playoffs defensively. And I don't know if you can count on him to be an 82 elite defensive player the way he was 2 seasons ago.
So you had them at 9. Which one am I on your list, or have we not gotten to yet?
We've got 2 of them, I believe, a young team and another team very close to you.
Okay, so we have 2 more left each, right? Okay.
Yeah, Oh, yeah,
We'll
we
get to
went
that.
through Miami. So it's really just the young team and then my surprise pick.
I wonder if our surprise pick is the same. We'll find out next here on Locked On NBA. All right, back here, Locked On NBA, going through our list of what we think will be the top 10 defenses and defensive rating next season. Then we'll get to a couple of teams that we think are going to drop out of the top 10. Number 9 for me is Miami. They lose PJ Tucker. And that's a big loss, but I almost think it's going to be an even bigger loss because they just don't have a real power forward on the roster now. And so you just think about the lineup combinations and how small they are. They're going to be how small they already are, considering that Bam Adebayo is a smaller-ish kind of center. I think they're going to fall. Last year they were 4th. Yeah, last year they were 4th. The year before that, they were 10th. And that was a similar situation where they lost Jay Crowder after the bubble run. They didn't have a true power forward. They were still top 10 in defense. And that was a team without Kyle Lowry and had Goran Dragic defending the point of attack. This team has Kyle Lowry defending the point of attack. I think he's going to be better than he was last year. You still have Jimmy Butler. You still have Bam. You still have Spo. You still have Pat Riley at the top of things. They're going to be a good defensive team. They're still going to be a top 10 defensive team. I'm very confident in that. I just don't think they're going to be elite like they were last year. I think they're just going to be good.
You've kind of talked me down on them. I think I had them 5th on my list. And the stat about 2 years ago when they didn't have the reliable power forward, that one's really interesting to me. They're another team, though, that's like Boston, that's like Golden State, that's like Toronto, where I kind of just penciled them in for being elite. They've got a great coach. They've got a great culture. They've got great leaders who are going to make sure everybody's, locked in on the defensive side. So their floor to me is so high. And that was sort of the vote of confidence I gave him at 5. Now, you kind of talked me in. If I redid this list now, I might drop him to 7 or 8, but I'm with you. I would be very surprised if they were not a top 10 defense.
I mean, they have Caleb Martin right now penciled in for their starting power forward, and he's a 6'5" dude that should not be playing that position.
Yeah,
and he's thin. Yeah, he's not 6'5" like PJ Tucker, who's 6'5" both ways, right? Caleb Martin's only 6'5" one way. The thing with Miami, though, is they are one of these teams that could make a move during the regular season, and that move could be offensive leaning, or that move could be, hey, let's go find a starting caliber power forward, and then maybe they do by the end of the season rise up closer to where you had them at 5. My last team here, number 10. I wonder if this is your surprise team. It's my surprise team for my offensive ratings too. It's the Minnesota Timberwolves. I've got them at number 10.
I knew that's where you were going to go.
I think I'm a Timberwolves fan now based on these last 2 weeks. I don't know what happened. They were number 13 last season, which is above average. Yeah. And then they added Rudy Gobert, and that's the end of my math.
It's good math. It's really good math. Rudy Gobert last year, part of me, when I was first doing this, I had them the same. I had them like 7th or something like that. I'm like, if you have Rudy Gobert defense, then you look here. Wait, they didn't have a top 10 defense. So hold on. What's going on here? We don't know what this fit is. I think it's entirely possible that they're a top 5 defense next year, and they're just too big and they grab every rebound and, they shock everybody. I think there's another outcome where Karl Anthony Towns, who's one of the worst defenders in all of the NBA, that team find their vulnerabilities early and are able to exploit it. If you look at lineups, I know Jared Vanderbilt's not Rudy Gobert. They're very different, but he was their defensive ace that was kind of playing a similar role as a twin tower, so to speak.
Right.
And, that team kind of got cooked as well. So I'm not sure. This one, to me, putting them 10th almost felt like they'll be 15th or they'll be 5th. And so I took the bet that they're going to be 15th. I'm a little less confident that's going to work out for them.
So we have one surprise. Your one surprise team we have not mentioned yet. Can I get one guess?
Of course.
Before you reveal it? Okay. I really don't know. It's not going to be Denver, right?
You gotta guess easy, man. You can't overthink things here. I
I
mean,
don't
you got
know.
it right. You got it right. It's the
Is it really
Denver Nuggets.
Denver?
It's the Denver Nuggets. They're 15th last year.
Oh, on
15th
brand.
last year. Here's
Okay.
the thing.
Okay.
They were 15th without their second and third best. They add Kentavious Caldwell-Pope and Bruce Brown. Easily the best defensive team of the Jokic era. Easily. And if we actually look, I think people have this perception of the Nuggets. What were they, 20th on defense all these years? 2 years ago, the last time that they had a healthy Michael Porter and a healthy Jamal Murray, they were 11th.
Yeah.
They were 11th. This is not a team that has like hovered around the fringes of the 20s or something. This is a team that has been 11th, 12th, somewhere around there. And this is a more mature version of them. Again, 2 years of basically disguised because of how injured they've been. But you add some defensive weapons all around, and you bring back your core pieces. And I just think Denver's going to be. And it's not elite defense. This isn't putting them. I'm not putting them 6th, 7th here. But I do think that when you look at it, the Timberwolves are the one team that, if you said who are the other contenders around here, to me, the Timberwolves are the only team that I said that fluctuates. Maybe they are elite defensively and it works out. But outside of that, I look at the rest of the teams and I go, no, I think Denver defensively is going to be better than them.
I'm razzing you a little bit. I actually don't have a problem with it. I considered putting Denver in my top 10. You mentioned the 2 years ago stat. That was the one I was looking at too. They were 11th in defensive rating, like you said, when they were fully healthy. And Jokic has only gotten better in those 2 years defensively, right? He is not the negative that he was back then. And even then, 2 years ago was probably a little overstated. I think we've caught up with the fact that he's a pretty good defender and he's definitely a deterrent in the paint just because of his size and you know, his
In the
spark
regular season, yes.
in the regular season. And this is what this is. It's a regular season. I'm okay with it. I really am. All right. So I think there's probably fans of Cleveland, of Dallas, and of Utah wondering, well, maybe not Utah.
I
think
had
you probably know what
Cleveland,
happened.
by the way. I had them 8th. And
You did have
they're
them
another. Yeah, I did have Cleveland 8th, and they're another team that I could just see being really high. I mean, I'm so high on Evan Mobley, and I think he's going to be one of these players throughout his entire career that it's going to be hard not to have a top 10 defense when he's on your roster.
They were number 5 last year in defensive rating, and they were 4th in rating before Jared Allen got hurt for the last couple months of the season.
Stat.
But I think, look, I'm assuming Colin Sexton is going to be playing for them next year, and he'll be healthy. He only played 11 games last year. Karis LeVert will be there for a full season. I don't think he's as good as people think he is defensively. But I do think the novelty of like the 3 bigs will wear off a little bit, you know, with Markkanen at the 3 and stuff, which like I said earlier, threw a curveball, I think, at the rest of the league. But Evan Mobley is so freaking good. Jared Allen's awesome. Borderline defensive player of the year candidate last year before he got hurt. My thing is they just don't have a ton of two-way guys to sort of fill out the rest of the rotation. And I wonder, because last year they were 20th in offensive rating and you know, ultimately weren't super good. They were surprising. It was a great story, but it wasn't like they were going to win anything in the playoffs. I wonder if they try to shift the rotations to lean a little bit more offense with the calculated sacrifice of defense. I would, if we did a top 11, I would have had them at 11 and I would have felt pretty good about it. I think they're going to be one of the better defenses. I just don't have them as good as they were last year. I think they'll take a step back and they'll play Colin Sexton more, a little bit more Karis LeVert, maybe a little bit less Isaac Okoro and a little bit more of some of the other guys. I don't know. That's just a guess. And then Dallas, we both didn't have them. They were 7 last year. What was your reasoning for not having the Mavericks in your top 10?
You got Christian Wood out there now. You've changed what you're trying to do.
I mean,
honestly, I don't know if they're going to be as good offensively. You're going to have an enormous load now on Luka. Not that he hasn't carried an enormous load for the last several seasons, but I feel like even more so now. I would not. And then also, this happened with Jason Kidd in Milwaukee a few years back. He goes there, elevates him immediately in an elite defense. Second year drops off almost entirely. So I think I'm curious to see if that repeats itself. If there's a little bit of this, okay, Jason Kidd has a 1-year shelf life for improving an elite defense, but we'll see. I mean, they wouldn't surprise me either if they were top 10. They do it pretty consistently, but yeah, I'm gonna count them on the outside.
I like the Jason Kidd first year in Milwaukee comparison. I was kind of looking at them as the Knicks in Tom Thibodeau's first year. I think they finished 4th in Thibodeau's first year, and then the year after that, they were like, "All right, let's take it easy now defensively. We don't have to we don't have to impress this new guy anymore." And I think that was a big part of why Dallas was so good last year. Is they were just playing really hard. They also benefited from some poor mid-range and 3-point shooting variance numbers by their opponent. I think that'll come back down to earth. And also, they lose Jalen Brunson. And I know that he's not a good defender, especially in the playoffs. He could be worked over, but he tries hard. And I think that kind of stuff matters in the regular season. And when you lose him, I don't know. Like Spencer Dinwiddie was always supposed to be a good defender. He's all right. Tim Hardaway, kind of same thing with him. They don't try as hard as Jalen Brunson does, and I just really think so much of this stuff in the regular season comes down to just really trying super hard. And yeah, so and you mentioned the Christian Wood bit. That's also a big part of the calculus for me. Utah was the other team. They finished 10th last year in defensive rating. They drop off because they don't care anymore. They're trying to do things. So
they drop way off.
They could go from number 10 to the worst defense in the league. They could be the worst defense in the league.
They got Walker Kessler, who is like one of the best shot blockers we've seen come out.
I like him a lot.
Come out. So I mean, it's a rookie. I don't know how much you're going to save a team, but I don't know if anybody could. He's one of those guys that could be one of these elite rim protectors right out of the package.
Any final thoughts on defenses before we close it out?
Not really. This one was significantly harder to do. I think it's easy to see a team and what's their identity on offense. You just know, okay, they're going to shoot, they're going to rebound, they're going to get to the paint, whatever. Defensively, I mean, schemes, identities, and you're almost going more off of reputation, I feel, or at least for me. I was going more off of reputation and recent examples than I was on the offensive end, where you just kind of put more thought into how is it going to work. Defensively, I think it's your identity and who you've been.
I think you're right, because I really tried to overthink this. I looked at trends dating back 3, 4, 5, 10 years. I was trying to figure out what's going on. I was just really trying to Rain Man this thing. And at the end of the day, I think I kind of fell on what you did. It was just, who cares about defense? So much about it. It's just, do you care about it? If you do, I'm going to put you in my top 10. And like I said, I feel good about the teams. I feel terrible about the order. I have no idea where it's going to be. I think we're on the same page there. All right, that'll do it for us today. Remember to subscribe to new episodes of Locked On NBA wherever you listen to podcasts for 30 minutes of the top stories in the NBA every day. Until next Friday, you can find me over at Locked On Heat and Adam over at Locked On Nuggets. Thank you for making Locked On NBA your first listen every day. Thanks for joining me, Adam.